Hello, everyone. Today we're going to discuss the causes, course, and consequences of the American Civil War. The American Civil War was caused by tensions between the North and the South over the issue of slavery. The issues that arose in the 1850s were the consequences of westward expansion into new territories, increasing social tensions over the issue, and the outcomes of key historical events. Through westward expansion, the United States acquired a large amount of territory in the late 1840s, throwing the uneasy balance between the North and South into jeopardy. This large amount of new land led to fears in the South that many of the new states, especially California, would likely be free states and undo the balance between free states and slave states in Congress. This, they feared, would give Northern politicians the power to abolish slavery. Easing these concerns was the purpose of the Compromise of 1850, in which California entered as a free state. Other territories could choose whether or not to practice slavery, a concept known as popular sovereignty, and the strict Fugitive Slave Act. The Fugitive Slave Act of 1850 was designed to keep Southern slave owners satisfied, as it required law enforcement to identify, arrest, and return any runaway slaves anywhere in the nation. It also led to an increase in the kidnapping and selling into bondage of free African Americans. As westward expansion populated territories that then became states, with senators, the political compromises crumbled. A congressional act to extend choice in Kansas and Nebraska led to violent clashes between pro- and anti-slavery forces. A notable example was the conflict to control the government of Bleeding Kansas in 1854. The issues of expansions also flared tensions when proposals to acquire Cuba led many in the North to believe the South was trying to expand its influence and extend slavery to any part of the nation. This was known as the Austin Manifesto. The debate over slavery was also reflected in many social interactions during this time. A notable example of this was chronicled in Solomon Northup's 12 Years a Slave. Although Northup's ordeal occurred before 1850, his account added to the awareness of the dangers faced by African Americans throughout the country. In 1852, a novel by Harriet Beecher Stowe, Uncle Tom's Cabin, highlighted the brutality of slavery, tearing apart of families, and the physical violence slaves endured on a daily basis. The book sparked national conversations about slavery and led to the increased support for abolition in the North and opposition to the Fugitive Slave Act. Additionally, there were a number of events that escalated the debate over slavery. In 1857, a slave named Dred Scott sued for his freedom under the argument that he traveled to a free state and that his presence in a free state legally ended his bondage. The Supreme Court ruled against him, and they also added that no person of African descent was considered a citizen as recognized by the U.S. Constitution. In 1859, an abolitionist named John Brown tried to start a slave rebellion by attacking a U.S. armory in Harper's Ferry, Virginia. Brown and his partners were captured, tried, and executed, but the outpouring of sympathy by many of the North angered Southerners who saw him as a terrorist and a product of Northern culture. By the late 1850s, all three of these factors contributed to a heightened state of tension between the North and the South. Okay, now let's talk about the election of 1860, which was the more immediate cause of the Civil War. By 1860, the tensions between the North and South were at a boiling point. The emergence of the new Republican Party also presented the nation with a party that was clearly against the expansion of slavery. Their candidate in the election of 1860 was Abraham Lincoln, who became a rising star in the party during his failed campaign for an Illinois Senate seat in 1858. Competing against Stephen Douglas, Lincoln debated his opponent on 7 occasions. Even though Lincoln lost that election, he made a name for himself as a future Republican star. Lincoln won the presidential election of 1860 by receiving less than 40% of the popular vote. As only one of the 4 major candidates, he was left off the ballot entirely in many states in the South. His victory sparked widespread anger and fear in the South that he would move to abolish slavery, and within a month South Carolina was drafting articles of succession. Lincoln tried to calm the fears of slave owners by declaring, "I have no purpose, directly or indirectly, to interfere with the institution of slavery in the states where it exists. I believe I have no lawful right to do so, and I have no inclination to do so." Ultimately, 11 states seceded from the Union, declaring some aspect of states' rights over their authority to control such decisions as whether or not to practice slavery. After a Confederate attack on Fort Sumter in April of 1861, a civil war existed between the North and South. Okay, let's talk about the key battles and evolving policies now that the Civil War had officially begun. At the start of the war, the outcome was unclear. While the North had a sizable advantage in resources and population, the South needed only to avoid defeat. They had no urgency to invade the North. The Union enacted a naval blockade around the South, which is known as the Anaconda Plan, in an attempt to prevent the Confederacy from importing supplies. The tide of the war began to shift by 1863 after key victories at Vicksburg and Gettysburg. In July of 1863, the Union cut the Confederacy in half and took control of the Mississippi River, a key transport line after a decisive victory at Vicksburg, Mississippi. At nearly the same time, the Union repelled the effort of the Confederacy to invade the North at Gettysburg, ending the final serious attempt of the Confederacy to take the fight into Union territory. Lincoln's passionate speech afterward, the Gettysburg Address, made clear that the North would not rest until the nation was reunited. Additionally, Lincoln won the re-election of 1864. From there, the Union Army pushed deep into the South until a Confederate surrender in April of 1865. Throughout the war, Lincoln's public approach towards slavery also shifted. Midway through the war, and after a major victory at Antietam, Lincoln announced the liberation of slaves in the Confederacy as a war effort by issuing the Emancipation Proclamation. The proclamation also allowed the Union's army to increase its numbers through the enlistment of freed slaves, and it also made the war effort morally aligned toward the end of slavery, seeking to rally a cause in the North and make it less likely France and England would support the Confederacy and provide much-needed supplies. African Americans contributed to the Union effort. Emancipation allowed nearly 180,000 African Americans to serve in the Union, and African American women served as nurses, spies, and military supporters in various roles. The Emancipation Proclamation was a temporary order, though. It was aimed only at the states in rebellion, and its legal standing was questionable once the war was over, given the Dred Scott decision. By 1865, Congress ratified the 13th Amendment, which abolished slavery. Finally, let's take a look at the aftermath of the war. The immediate consequence of the Civil War was the abolition of slavery and the surrender of the Confederacy. But much was still left unclear by the end of the war. While slavery was now illegal, what would be the status of those who were freed by its abolition? The freedmen were still not able to vote, own property, or enjoy the other benefits of citizenship. Furthermore, while the fighting was over, the Union was not yet whole again. The infrastructure of many southern cities was destroyed, and its former leaders had previously decided to secede from the Union. As a result, there remained many questions as to how the nation would be reconstructed. Thanks everyone. Have a great day.